Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Sitting in for Pinky Webb, I'm Ria Tanwat-Cotrillo. Today on the program, senators slam PAGCOR's lack of urgency to address illegal POGOs. The controversial Maharlika Investment Fund bill now filed at the Senate. How will senators scrutinize the proposed sovereign wealth fund? And later, as harvest season nears, should the government push through with onion importation plans and address agri-smuggling? Senate Ways and Means Committee Chairman Sen Gatchalian joins us live. And we'll begin with this report. President Bongbong Marcos addresses controversial issues in an interview with a number of media personalities Monday, the first time since assuming office nearly 7 months ago. Rex Remitio has the details.
What could the government do to finally stop the unabated rise in prices of some prime commodities, like onion, sugar, egg, and others following suit? President Marcos says, import more. The chief executive admits the country's supply can no longer meet the demand for the products. He insists a 2-month buffer stock is a must.
It is an emergency situation that has been brought about by neglect of the agricultural sector for many, many years. And therefore, our production is well below our demand.
On the controversial Maharlika Investment Fund, the president assures it won't be used for money laundering. That's amid critics questioning the capacity and integrity of those who will manage the fund. Senator Mark Villar has just filed a counterpart bill after it was passed in the lower house.
Even on our end, we will only deploy funds when there is a very specific project to be paid for. So money laundering just won't come into it.
The president was also asked about reports the Chinese Coast Guard is again driving fisher folk off the Ayungin Shoal. He says they haven't come to a compromise yet, even if he just came from a state visit in China early this month. The chief executive also says his pursuit of close ties with China won't prevent the Philippines from protesting.
I just hope we can come to some kind of arrangement because I cannot see the utility for the Chinese of doing that. These fishing boats are not armed, they don't pose a threat to anyone.
He also denies reports the First Lady interferes in his decisions, like in the appointment of some top government officials. Yes, the president said he has been consulting his wife, but only on legal matters, not on political decisions.
Zero. She really has no input on that. She doesn't come to the office and sit with us at all.
President Marcos also says they're not grooming his son, Ilocos Norte Representative Sandro Marcos, as his successor. That's after the younger Marcos joined the president's overseas trips a number of times.
The reason he accompanies us is because he's an author of the Maharlika bill, the Maharlika Fund bill.
Rex Remitio, CNN Philippines.
A lawmaker grills state-run gaming firm Padkor for its supposed leniency on airing Philippine offshore gaming operators, or POGOs. The agency was slammed for allowing 2 service providers to operate despite their involvement in a kidnap for ransom case. Senators also question why Padkor entered into a 6 billion peso contract with a third-party auditor that has no permits. Let's go straight to the source of the story. Senate Ways and Means Committee Chairman Sen Gatchalian. Senator, good morning. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, Ria. Good morning to our televiewers.
All right, sir, let's first talk about what was uncovered on your 4th Senate investigation on POGO-related issues. First, it appears that firms linked to POGO-related kidnapping are still operating. Why is this, and how unacceptable is this for you, and why is PAGCOR allowing this?
Well, Ria, that goes to show that there is no sense of urgency in PAGCOR. Senator Poe gave a privileged speech sometime December 12, and she basically named 2 licensees / service providers duly accredited by PAGCOR who are embroiled in a kidnapping case. From then on, PAGCOR has not done anything significant to penalize those two airing service providers slash licensees other than finding them with 500,000 pesos. They still operate in our country. They're still employed. They still employ foreign workers, and they're still making money here in our country. The 500,000 pesos is not enough. It's minuscule compared to the billions of pesos that they earn. But that goes to show the kind of sense of urgency that PAGCOR is employing against airing licensees and airing service providers.
So in your view, Senator, that 500,000 is basically just a slap on the wrist. In your view, what should have been done?
Well, definitely, if I'm PAGCOR, after that privilege speech, they should have been proactive in terms of looking for those airing licensees. They should have coordinated proactively with the police force. They should have conducted their own investigation. All of those are within their manual. The answer to us yesterday, as of January 23, they're still coordinating with the police. This is already more than a month after the privilege speech has been given. So we're talking about kidnapping case here. We're talking about human trafficking case here. We cannot let this type of individuals and operators operate in our shores because that's the kind of criminal activity that they are embroiled in. But also, more importantly, it highlights the conflict of interest of PAGCOR. PAGCOR makes money out of the licensees and the service providers. On the other hand, they're making money. They're making revenue. On the other hand, they're regulating, meaning they're enforcing laws against this licensee. So it goes to show that profits is more supreme over regulation. And that's why these airing licensees are allowed to operate despite the police report against these two airing licensees.
Right, definitely a conflict of interest there. In your view, Senator, how should the government deal with this? Should POGO regulations now be moved to another agency?
I think moving forward, we have to take this conflict of interest very seriously. This is prevalent. Actually, this is prevalent across government, different government offices. It was a talk during the investigation on CAAP, where CAAP operates the airport and regulates the airport as well. But in the case of gaming, PAGCOR operates the casinos, operates the POGO through their licensees, but at the same time, they also regulate the POGOs through their regulation. So moving forward, it's much more prudent to establish a separate gaming operator, or a separate gaming regulator regulating all operations of casinos in our country, including PAGCOR. PAGCOR should be subjected to an independent regulator because they also operate casinos.
So would you suggest this goes under an existing agency, or would a new agency have to be created for this purpose?
Well, in my view, because PAGCOR is an existing ongoing concern, let them do their thing by operating casinos, operating other forms of games of chance. In my view, it's much cleaner. It's much cleaner to establish a separate gaming regulator regulating all gaming corporations, including PAGCOR itself.
All right, sir. Now, another issue raised during the hearing was the so-called budol. And the reputation of PAGCOR's third-party auditor seems highly questionable. Who should be liable when something like this actually manages to happen and it seems that they weren't vetted properly?
Well, Ria, let me emphasize the importance of the third-party auditor. We have to understand that under the law, RA 11590, it's specified in this law that a third-party auditor should be contracted, and the third-party auditor should be reputable, independent, and accredited by international bodies. The law specified how government will be collecting taxes and how government will be collecting regulatory fees. So it's all based on the reports that the auditor gives to government. So if the auditor has credibility issues, if the auditor gives us the wrong value, we'll be collecting the wrong taxes, we'll be collecting the wrong regulatory fees. So the credibility and the accuracy is very important insofar as the third-party auditor is concerned. And the technical capability. We have to understand also POGO operates in the internet. No, everything's operated digitally. There's no physical casino happening that you can count the chips. Everything's done electronically and digitally. So the third-party auditor should be technically capable. But it came out in our hearings that it's undercapitalized. It gave PAGCOR fraudulent bank guarantees. It doesn't have the technical capability. So, in other words, we don't have the confidence that the third-party auditor is indeed giving us the correct figures.
But how does this happen? How does an auditor like that pass the standards? I mean, these things that you mentioned are fairly basic. Nobody checked that?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Ria. Basically, PAGCOR violated its own terms of reference. During the bidding, the PAGCOR specified a few standards through its terms of reference. It has minimum standards for technical capability. It said it should have ₱1 billion in terms of operating capital. And just to focus on the operating capital, we looked at the audited financial statements of each investor in the third-party auditor, and we found out that they're all undercapitalized. The main investor only has 7 million in terms of equity, and this entity is supposed to cough up 500 million pesos in terms of equity. So to cover that, they issued a bank guarantee from a bank called Solel Chartered Bank. But we found out from the BSP that there is no Solel Chartered Bank registered under the BSP, let alone an unregistered bank cannot issue bank guarantees. So in other words, the bank guarantee that was given to PAGCOR is spurious. It's fake. Mm-hmm. And yet PAGCOR used that fake bank guarantee to accredit and to award the contract to this third-party auditor. Just to name the third-party auditor, it's called Globalcom RCI.
All right, sir. Now, given this situation, what are the liabilities on the PAGCOR officials who allowed this third-party auditor to come in, or any charges going to be filed against them?
Well, initially, there's malfeasance in terms of the bidding procedures. There are definitely highly questionable acts in terms of the bidding procedures that led to the awarding of contract to this third-party auditor, Globalcom RCI specifically. And we will pursue that investigation through the Blue Ribbon Committee. I will talk to Senator Tolentino because this is the realm of the Blue Ribbon Committee on investigating the actual bidding procedure. But initially, what we have found out that insofar as the credibility of the third-party auditor, it's highly questionable. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we cannot guarantee that the gross gaming revenue that is being given to government is accurate. And we cannot guarantee also that the taxes being collected by BIR as well as PAGCOR is accurate. In fact, during the past hearings, we found out that there's a tendency of POGO licensees to undervalue. We found out that they are not paying the right taxes. In fact, they should be paying the deficiency in terms of taxes is about 3 to 4 billion.
Now, Senator, since you started investigating the cost of POGOs and seeing the bigger picture and all the different problems related to this, do you still feel that the country should continue to allow POGOs to operate here, or should they be banned permanently?
Well, Ria, that will be the recommendation of the committee report. And the committee report will be sent out anytime today, latest tomorrow. And we will route this to our members for them to study and to sign. But bottom line here is, if POGO will be banned in our country, our economy will not collapse. Mm-hmm. POGO has contributed very little to the overall economy. It's less than 1% of our total GDP in terms of revenue. It's less than 1% in terms of gross value added, meaning contribution to our economy. In terms of employment, it's also less than 1%. In fact, during the heydays of POGO in 2019, out of the 120,000 employed persons in the POGO industry, less than 10% comes from locals. So in terms of job generation, it's very small for our local employees.
Yeah, so what you're saying, Senator, is we'll barely feel the pinch if POGOs will no longer be allowed to operate in the country. So, sir, what do you think is going to be the recommendation within that committee report?
I'll reserve that for now, Ria, because we're finishing the committee report and we'll be routing that within the day, latest tomorrow. So I'll reserve that question for now.
All right, sir, do stay with us. We do need to take a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Ria Tanwat-Cotrillo, and our source today, Senator Sen Gatchalian. Senator, welcome back to the program. Now I'd like to talk about the Maharlika Investment Fund. A Senate bill has been filed, I believe, by Senator Mark Villar, creating the Maharlika Investment Fund. And the bill is similar to what the House passed last December. So could you tell us how senators will be scrutinizing the bill in the upper house?
Well, Ria, haven't read the Senate version of the bill. But just to answer your question, there's great interest among our senators to look at this bill. This bill has been certified urgent by the president, meaning it's a priority bill. So the senators are quite interested in terms of how this bill can be beneficial to our country. Personally, I remain open to this proposal. I said in my past interviews that this proposal is nothing out of the extraordinary. A lot of countries have been implementing their own version of a sovereign wealth fund. In fact, some countries which are, some African countries which are less developed than the Philippines have their own sovereign wealth funds. So the concept is really nothing new. It's been there for decades. However, in my opinion, the most fundamental question is, do we have the funds to invest and to set up a sovereign wealth fund? And then number two, if there are funds, is it enough? Is it at scale that we can actually generate the amount of return that we are expecting?
Right. Now, this bill, as you mentioned, it's a priority bill for the president. His family were the ones who proposed it, his son, his cousin-in-law, and then he did that soft launch in Davos. Does this mean the public can expect swift passage of the Maharlika bill?
The way the Senate operates is quite different from the House, meaning because we're only 24 and the senators act and think independently, even though we're in the same party lines. In fact, many of the bills cross party lines. It's really based on issue. So I think it will take a little bit more time in the Senate in terms of studying it, in terms of getting data, in terms of scrutinizing the proposal. What's important, aside from if we have the funds, is how can it contribute to nation building? Because I've heard so many comments in the news as to the overall goal of the bill. Is it for development? Is it to earn returns? Is it to generate returns for the next generation? So we have to determine first what is the overall goal of the bill.
You mentioned the importance of, do we have enough funds? At this point in time, do we have enough funds to create a bill such as this?
That's why I want to take a look at the source of funds. There's so many iterations of this bill already. And I think the latest one is funds will be called out of the dividends from the GOCCs. That's a potential source, but we have to remember those dividends form part of the General Appropriations Act. And if we take out the dividends from the General Appropriations Act, we'll be taking out also funds from much needed projects and programs. For example, roads, schools. So we have to balance that. I think one of the most important fundamental questions will be, where will we source the funds? And if we source the funds, will it be enough to generate the returns that we're expecting? Because part of the objectives of the fund is to generate returns, for generations to come.
Now, proponents and supporters of the bill were surprised by the admission that a four-man panel re-engineered or revised the bill, even if it had already passed on third and final reading. Now, as far as parliamentary process is concerned, is this regular, irregular, questionable? What's your opinion on that?
No, that's not irregular, Ria. The legislative process is a working process from the House to the Senate, and the either house has their own prerogative in forming technical working groups, four-man re-engineering panel, whatever you call it. No, but each house, it's their own prerogative to create bodies to further study the bill, look at the bill. In most cases, the most usual process is to form a technical working group, and the technical working group can be composed of members, experts, as well as resource persons.
Right. Yesterday we spoke to House Senior Deputy Minority Leader Paul Daza, and he said that, even as one of the signatories to the bill, he was not informed that these revisions would be made. Shouldn't the signatories at least be informed?
I'm not very sure of what happened in the House. It's very hard to comment because that's the dynamics of the House. I'm not very sure what happened there.
All right. Now, under the re-engineered bill, the BSP is no longer going to be a source of funds for the Maharlika Investment Fund. And now the funds will be generated through an IPO. And when I spoke to Congressman Daza yesterday, he was saying he actually favors this as that process would require greater transparency. What's your view on this?
Well, there are many forms of IPO. Is it an initial public offering of primary shares? Is it a secondary offering? There's so many variations of IPO. But in general, an IPO can be done. And when you do an IPO, meaning you are inviting private investors to sit on the board to help govern the fund. And this is a good concept because we now have a way of checking and balancing the interests of government through the participation of the private sector. So there's a check and balance mechanism. Now, if you are also doing an IPO to increase the size of the fund, then that's a different concept altogether because the whole point of a sovereign wealth fund is investing the sovereign wealth, not investing private capital. So that's a different concept altogether. But I think what's important here is I think from what I hear in the news, the IPO is meant to improve the governance activities of the fund, which I think there's merit to that.
So, Senator, given these changes and the controversies hounding the bill, do you feel there's an urgent need to pass it?
Well, this is the legislative process, Ria. If there are issues, then let's talk about the issues. Let's debate on the issues. If the issues outweigh the benefits, then let's vote on it. If the members think that it's not going to be beneficial, then it will lose on the voting. But that's the legislative process. That's democracy. You talk about issues, whether you like it or not, then you vote on it. And the most important here is we scrutinize the bill, we look at the benefits, and we make sure that it will not be abused in the future. And we put safeguards so that management so that the taxpayers will be protected through those safeguards.
All right, we need to take a short break again, Senator. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Ria Tanwat-Cotrillo. Our source today, Senator Sen Gatchalian. Senator, welcome back. We need to talk about onion smuggling now. Some lawmakers are appealing to stop the importation of onions and prevent it from entering the market to give a chance to local farmers whose harvest is coming up. And for the part of the president, he seems bent on importing. What is your take on all of that?
Well, Ria, I think overall, we see the importance of, number one, monitoring our supply and demand. I've seen this phenomenon in the past few years. We have more intense rain. We have more typhoons coming in. We have more typhoons coming in the south. Before, we were used to seeing typhoons hitting the north, Metro Manila, but it's now going to the south. And I think this is this is a result of climate change. And climate change is now impacting food security in our country. Many of the reports, including onions, the reason why onion supply has been going down is number one, because of typhoons and because of calamities. And number two, the reason why we're having shortage is because of our ballooning population. We're now hitting close to 110 million in terms of population. So, but let's focus on the climate change. And this typhoons and intense rain hitting our country is affecting not only onions, but also rice and other crops. So my point of the matter there is we have to take this into account and monitor supply and demand. There will never be an equilibrium of supply and demand. At one point, it's either we're going to have more of produce or less of produce. And this is where short-term importation will come in. But in the long run, we have to take this into account and make sure that our farmers are resilient, our farm processes are resilient, and take climate change into account.
All right, Senator, that is all we have time for today. But thank you, as always, for joining us here on The Source. That was Senate Ways and Means Committee Chairman Sen Gatchalian. And thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Maria Tanwat Cotrillo. You're watching CNN Philippines.